Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm glad you could be here with me. I just recently finished the final book in the Millennium Trilogy by Stieg Larsson. The first book, of course, is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, followed by The Girl Who Played with Fire, and the final book, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. Now, as many of you are aware, there are other books in this series not written by Stieg Larsson. They have essentially taken the characters and handed it over to a new author because of Stieg Larsson's untimely demise a few years ago. And so I've heard that the other books in the series are not that great. I probably won't read them. Who knows? I may. If I have nothing else better to read, I might pick up another book and see what it's like. But I've heard they're nowhere near as good as these books, and these books are great. And that's why I have titled this video, Why You Should Read the Millennium Trilogy. And so we'll get right to that, but keep in mind, this only covers the first three books, because that is what I consider Stieg Larsson's magnum opus. It's what he left, and it is a full and complete story all on its own, and a very satisfying story, I might add. So it takes place in Sweden, and there are a few different characters. The main characters are Mikael Blomkvist, who is a reporter. He's a journalist. He works with a magazine called Millennium, and he does some freelance work as well. And he gets this idea for a big story on this tycoon who was put away a few years ago named Wennerstrom. And he's doing some research, and he stumbles upon this other story that may or may not be closely related about a woman who disappeared, and no one in her family kind of knows where she is or what happened to her. They're thinking she might be dead. Her name's Harriet Wenger, and so he gets wrapped up in this. He enlists the help of a computer hacker named Lisbeth Salander, and he's found out about her through a place that she's often employed at, off and on. It's a security firm that she does some work for, helps them out with some of their work and some of their cases. And he's well acquainted with the owner of the security firm, and so he goes to him and he's like, do you have anybody that you could help me with this? And he refers Lisbeth Salander to him. So Lisbeth Salander is a very, very unique character. Not only is she a brilliant computer hacker, scarily so. I mean, she's just mind-blowing, the things that she can do with a computer. But she's also got a brilliant, brilliant mind. Her IQ is probably through the roof, although I don't know that she's ever necessarily been tested according to the books. But she's just brilliant. But she's also extremely eccentric. Like anything that you would think of in terms of someone you consider to be an anarchist, she's it. Every social norm, she just completely shoves to one side. She doesn't care. She's completely her own person. And that makes her a very endearing character. Because if we're honest with ourselves, we all have that little voice inside us that wants to completely be ourselves and just to not care what anybody thinks. And so when you're reading the book, at least for me, I was very apt to relate to her in a very deep way. So just this really, really cool and unique character. I mean, you know, she's got tattoos, piercings all over. She's just, you know, completely free with her sexuality. Just all these different things that just make her a bane to society, or at least what people call a civilized society, right? Um, so the two of them get together and they go on this quest, not only to get more research on this book that Mikhail is trying to write for his journalism work at Millennium, but he's also he's also kind of stumbled upon some information that might lead to solving the case of Harriet Wenger's disappearance. And so that's how it starts out, and it's just a thrill ride nonstop. I mean, I could not put the first book down. It's suspenseful, it's riveting, it has you on the edge of your seat so many times. The character interactions, the little tidbits that you learn about Lizbeth and about Mikhail himself, and it's just a fantastic ride. So it's just got action, thriller, and mystery, and all those different things wrapped up into this neat little ball and put onto the page. So if you like mysteries and you like whodunits and you like suspense thrillers, this is a book series for you. And I will say too, one thing that makes it really kind of fun is, I mean, you're sitting there reading these books, and they're talking about streets and names of places that you have no idea how to pronounce them. They're Swedish locales and Swedish names of places and streets and stuff. And half the fun of reading the book is just trying to figure out, okay, how would I pronounce that name? That was kind of funny, but it's a side note completely. I just, slight tangent there. I had to get off and talk about that for a minute. It does make it really fun and interesting just to try and pronounce the names of the places. But if you want a self-contained story, you can stop at book 1. I don't recommend you stop at book 1. It gives you so many little tidbits to kind of wet your whistle and decide, okay, what's next? What happens after this? But it's a complete and thorough end to a story that if you wanted to just stop with book 1, you could. But I will say, if you decide to read book 2, you will have to read book 3, because book 3 and book 2 are one complete story. So when you get to the end of book 2, it will be a cliffhanger, and you will have to read book 3. I know, because I got stuck doing that. I got to the end and I'm like, oh no, now I have to buy book 3. And I was going to anyway, right? It was on my TBR for the year to finish the Millennium Trilogy. That was one of my goals, and I did it. And I'm very glad I did it. But just know, you cannot take this in just 2 books. If you decide to read the second book, you will have to read the third. So be prepared for that. But they're so good, and you will want to know the rest of the story. And I'll give you a little tidbit as to what goes on. So at the end of book 1, between the ending and the beginning of book 2, at some point, Blomkvist and Lisbeth Salander have kind of fallen out of touch, and they've kind of there's become some kind of bad blood with Lisbeth in terms of Mikhail Blomkvist. So she's kind of got this bone to pick with him, and she just kind of is rejecting him, and she's not taking his phone calls, returning his emails, things like that. It's like she's dropped off the face of the earth. And in the second book, it focuses on a sex trafficking ring, and there have come about some murders that have happened as a result of some girls who have been brought from other countries to be part of this sex trafficking ring. And then at some point the girls end up getting killed or or they're extremely mistreated. They're young. They're not even of age to be in to make choices for themselves sexually, to be involved in something like that. And so there's a couple of people, a man and a woman that are in love, and they're both working on different aspects of exposing this sex trafficking business. And it turns out that at the bottom of this, there is this large organization that has created this hush hush mentality around what's going on. It turns out that it is a conspiracy by the government. There's this cabal that is kind of watching over everything, and the couple that is researching and trying to expose the sex trafficking ring end up getting murdered. And then there's this large investigation into who murdered them, and somehow Lisbeth Salander's name got involved, and she's suspected of murders. But it's just, you're glued to the edge of your seat throughout this whole thing as you're watching it unfold, and you're going like, okay, how did the tide turn so quickly for Lisbeth Salander? So the final two books are really an expose into the life and inner workings of Lisbeth Salander's world, her backstory, her family, and at the same time there's this murder investigation going on, and they're trying to track down her or possibly other murderers that are involved, and trying to bring them to justice, and other murders happen as a result, and people in Lisbeth's life start getting accosted and attacked by some of the members of this group that's created this conspiracy. So it's just in the first book, it's just kind of this standard murder mystery suspense thriller. But then the doors just get blown wide open in the second book, and in the third book. So literally, you are left at the end of book 2 completely wondering what the hell happened. And okay, I have all this information, now what's going to happen? And there is nothing. You don't get any answers, and that's why I say you have to read book 3. So I highly recommend this series for anyone who likes suspense thrillers. If you like things like The Bourne Identity, you will really love this series. If you like classic murder mysteries, you'll love this series. If you like really, really violent gangster movies, you will probably like this series. And it's definitely not for the faint of heart. I will say that there are some things you have to be aware of. It gets very violent at times. It gets very violent. So there is a lot of bloodshed. There is a lot of violence. There is a lot of sexual content in these books. More so in book 1 than there probably is in books 2 and 3, but it's still there. Especially in book 2, because it does center around a sex trafficking ring. So be aware of that when you're going into these books. If you're squeamish when it comes to stuff like that, maybe this book series isn't for you. But there is a lot of language too. I mean, they don't hold back on the language. If a book could be rated, this one would be rated R, right? It's definitely for people who don't mind stuff like that in books. So if that bothers you, maybe it's not for you, but I highly, highly recommend it. If that stuff doesn't bother you, it definitely doesn't bother me. It's just like, it's a story, and it's a very, very well told story. And it's really sad that Stieg Larsson died so young, because he was obviously wanting to go somewhere with those characters. And even though the series ends in a satisfying way, it was obvious that there could have been more, and I think that's why they handed it off to a new author to continue the story of the characters. But very, very well done. There were a few movies made of it. 3 movies were made in Europe. They were in Swedish with English subtitles, and one for each of the books. So if you're into a complete story and you don't mind subtitles, you might want to check out those movies, because it does cover all 3 books. There was a movie made in America a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago even, based on the first book, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and Daniel Craig from James Bond and Knives Out. If you've seen any of those movies, he played the main character of Michael Blomkvist. So if you're into checking those out, I haven't seen any of the movies, but I plan to watch them soon now that I've read the books. And I'm just really, really impressed with this story, guys. If you're looking for something completely unique and different, but with a classic thriller and mystery feel to it, I highly recommend the Millennium Trilogy. And just take note of some of those things that I warned you about, some of the content that's there. But I was just on the edge of my seat. I could not put those books down. I probably read the 3rd book in like a week, or maybe a little more. It didn't take me long at all. So let me know what you think in the comments. Have you read these books? Are they something that have sparked your interest, but you've been on the fence about them? Or maybe you've never heard of them. I hadn't even heard of them until I saw advertisements for the movie, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I'm like, oh, what is this? I'm going to look into this and see what it's all about. And lo and behold, it sounded really interesting, and I decided to pick up the books, and I'm so glad I did. Yeah, if you've never heard of them like I hadn't, make sure you check these out. I will leave links in the description below where you can purchase the books, and I'll even leave links to the movies if you want to check those out. I think you can buy them at most major retailers, both digital and physical copies. So I highly recommend you check those out. I probably will soon. I'm looking forward to seeing those movies. And just make sure you let me know what your thoughts are on it, and maybe you read the books and you didn't like them at all. Let me know in the comments about that too. I'd love to dialogue with you and figure out what it was that bothered you, what it was you didn't like. But make sure that you interact with me on this video. I'd love to talk about that. In my next couple of videos, I've got some great content coming for you. I'm going to be talking about a book that I really didn't finish. I am going to be doing a review of the American Gods TV series here in the near future. I'm almost finished with season 2 of it, and I'll let you know what I think, give you my initial thoughts on American Gods, and maybe I'll talk a little bit about the book as I'm doing that TV show review, because they are related, so why not? And with that being said, guys, make sure you're doing all this stuff here on the screen. You know the drill. Help me out, support my channel, like my videos and stuff. Make sure to share it. Description, as always, don't forget to check the description. And with that being said, guys, I hope you have an amazing weekend. Make sure that you are reading more books this weekend. I'll talk to you in my next video. Have a great one. Bye.